Hey guys, just popping in here at the start to let you know a little bit about the history of this video. Don't worry, I'll make it short, but I think it's important that you hear it and get some context. I began this project in December of 2021. That's almost 4 years ago from the time this is getting published. The reason it took so long is pretty simple. My mom died, I lost my home, and had to learn how to live on my own for the first time. Yeah, some heavy stuff, so needless to say, I'm not the same person I was when this began. The Emily you're about to hear from is a mix of a ton of different Emilys, largely a much more innocent one, I suppose you could say. And because of that, I'm afraid the quality and tone jumps around at times, especially near the end where things get a bit scattered. It essentially has two different endings, so I'm sorry about any confusion. With that being said, I think this video is interesting in an artistic sense just because it essentially grew up with me throughout the years. I wondered if I should change some things, but decided that I really just needed to move on from this. Plus I wanted to respect my past self's vision the same way I wouldn't try to rewrite old diary pages. Part of me considered not publishing this at all because it felt so personal for that reason, but I think that I won't be able to let it go until it's published and out there, since that was the intention from the beginning. So as you watch, just keep in mind that you're primarily seeing a me that no longer exists. I encourage you to kind of think of it as a video that was meant to come out in 2021, and you've kind of traveled back in time to watch it or something. Alright, that's all. Let this be a reminder to not wait to make what you want to make. You'll never be the person you are right now ever again, and you'll lose half of your sources. Oh my god, so much of what I talk about here is just gone now, it's crazy. Anyway, enjoy my labor of love, hope you learned something new, and have a good one. Please forgive my terrible editing. Bye bye. The year 2002 probably means a lot of things to a lot of different people. Maybe you remember playing the original Sims, or not so patiently waiting for the second Harry Potter movie to come out. Maybe you just gotten that second iPod with its whopping 20 gigs of storage. Its significance is simpler to me. It's my birth year. Now, obviously, I couldn't have remembered much from this time. I was a tiny baby with a big soft spot on my head, more occupied with finding things to put in my mouth anyway. But there is one other thing I associate with this year. In my home country of Canada, a little cartoon had begun discreetly airing on television. But before we talk about that, let's jump forward a couple years. I'm your average kid picking up spiders and, ironically enough, now refusing to put much of anything in my mouth. Something that, unfortunately, persists on to this very day. I'm sure I'll eat my greens eventually, Mom. My dad has this knack for finding fun or interesting things, and is what I'd call impulsive, in the best way possible. He comes home one day with a handful of these alien little devices called DVDs, all from some bargain bin, which of course means he's found some measure of hidden treasures. He's also just very good at finding awesome things in general. Elmo's World, The Muppet Show, probably some other Muppety thing, and 2 collections of episodes from a show called Kaput and Zösky. My sister and I watched all these DVDs a million times over, of course. Repetitive viewing was our favorite pastime. However, as we got older, our hoard of DVDs slowly began to shrink. Elmo's World is long gone. My vast Land Before Time collection had probably met a similar fate to the dinosaurs it featured, and by the time 2015 came around and we were moving into our new house, all that remained was a handful of our favorites. Some classic Christmas movies, some nerdy Star Trek ripoff my parents liked, the entirety of Fraggle Rock, rest in peace Jim Henson, we love you, and, miraculously, Kaput and Zösky. We watched it a few times over the years for nostalgia's sake, of course, so I never entirely forgot about the show. But it was just as the first winter sleet of 2021 began to fall that I decided to give the series a quick Google. A Wikipedia article, as expected, was the first thing I found. Down near the bottom of the page was a section detailing the home release of the series. There were 4 different collections, I owned half of them. Now, I'm sure we've both been up a little later than we should be, watching those awesome trendy iceberg videos and top 10 lists of the coolest lost media, so I'm sure you can empathize with my excitement when that big shiny Wikipedia article also informed me that these DVDs were very rare. So, I own rare media. That was awesome enough on its own, but wait, there's more. Apparently, some episodes had been essentially lost entirely. That was until some YouTube channel randomly uploaded the entire series around 2013. I figured I'd finish what I started while I still had the chance. I watched all 78 episodes within 2 days. That's when I first learned that Kaput and Zösky was a really strange show. Okay, before I get ahead of myself, I should probably start by actually telling you about the series. Dreamed up by comic artist Louis Trondheim around 1995 as a bonus page for a special issue of Le Journal de Mickey, a popular French comic publication, Kaput and Zösky is about two alien invaders named, well, Kaput and Zösky, and their pitiful attempts to dominate as many planets as possible. Trondheim decides he likes these characters and so reuses them for some more stories in various issues. Kaput and Zösky strips had appeared in Spirou and Trondheim's own publication Nimrod by the time he decided to approach a French publisher about making a dedicated book for the series. At the same time, Trondheim had been working out a deal with a producer about making another one of his comics into an animated series. The producer also saw Kaput and Zösky and bought the rights to make that a cartoon as well. And so, Kaput et Zösky les Flinguisers du Cosmos, alongside Kaput and Zösky, the Ultimate Obliterators, were both released in 2002. Google Translate says it means the sparklers of the cosmos, but that, it doesn't sound quite right. Maybe it's some kind of French dialect, I don't know. Interjection. I think we figured it out. I asked a French friend of mine, and they told me that flinguiser is likely something to do with the word fling, which means gun. I figured it was some kind of pun and therefore probably doesn't actually work in other languages like most puns, but then my buddy Flynn just put it into Google Translate on its own and found out that it means gunslingers. I hate you, Flynn, stop making me look stupid. Okay, no, interjection to the interjection. No, I Googled it, and the only thing that comes up in relation to this word are the books. The correct spelling does not have a Z in it. So this is still some kind of pun or wordplay, and I still don't know what it is. I told you, Flynn! The animated series aired on Nicktoons in Canada and Teletoon in France, and occupied its own little niche in the former. Around a year later, a second book comes out, and the strips continue to be reused for other publications, such as Mixed Strip Magazine. It wasn't long before all the episodes had been produced, and the 4 DVD sets had been released. And the last push for Kaput and Zösky drops in 2008 with the release of the English translations of all the comic strips. This was the last that was heard from the series for 5 years, until the now defunct YouTube channel Stars Media uploaded the entire series, including episodes thought to be completely gone, to the video sharing site. Another channel takes its place near 2019, Little Amigos, and that's really the end of the story. The series just petered out over time. It never got a ton of attention and simply lived a modest life on its channel of choice until something else came along to take its place, as every other cartoon does. But now that the timeline is out of the way, let's move on to what Kaput and Zösky is actually about. I'm gonna start with the show because it has more depth than the comics do, and it's just generally what most people, including myself, are more familiar with. As stated in the earlier section, Kaput and Zösky is about said two aliens. They're both these arrogant, sadistic jerks who just want to take over as many planets as possible. But thankfully for the universe, they're both total losers. Kaput's this dumpy little bastard who just wants to blow people up, and Zösky is a flamboyant pseudo-intellectual who fits all the criteria for a Tumblr sexy man. You know I'm right, don't at me. The two fly around in their crappy little spaceship looking for societies to rule over as bloodthirsty dictators, and fail every single time. I basically just told you the entire series. From the outside, it's a pretty generic early 2000s cartoon, but one of the things I find so unusual about this show is just how comfortable it is in its simplicity. Besides the main duo, there are around 5 characters with actual names and only a single recurring character, this green space redneck named Crazy Joe. Crazy Joe appears in around 3 episodes, and while we know he's an adversary to Kaput and Zösky, we're never actually told what their history is. The world building is in this really weird state of being both vast and limited. We're shown a new planet on almost every single one of the 78 episodes, giving us lots of these little peeks into this insanely big world, but not allowing us much more than a glance until we're off again on some other escapade. Consequently, this forces you to invest in the main characters, since they're the only constants in this universe. This also serves to imply that really, Kaput and Zösky are all each other have as well. This theme of erratically zooming this way and that around the cosmos, not staying in any place long enough to make any sorts of relationships, is what I find unique for a series like this. As when I think about any other cartoon in this era, there's always a point made to have an expansive world with a huge cast, to fill all of the common niches it needs. Kaput and Zösky is a show about two best friends on a glorified intergalactic road trip, and that's it. The show is aware that it isn't flashy or deep. It has this humbleness to it where it's just what it is and never apologizes, even when you can see the budget fluctuate. I'll tell you about that later. I think this is one of the reasons I enjoy it. It's just an earnest, comforting Saturday morning cartoon with simple plots. Just good, clean, wholesome fun. And that's not to say that it's got nothing going for it. I mean, I think the show is genuinely funny and even occasionally clever. One of my favorite things about it is the voice acting. Mark Camacho and Rick Jones provide the main characters with these really distinct and expressive voices that are just genuinely a lot of fun to listen to.
Time for a new plan. Something simple. We'll appear on that balcony where our people will assemble before us and acclaim us enthusiastically.
No. It'll take days for these slow-mo maggots to assemble. Let's just crisperize them all right now.
As I was describing these characters, there was something that I couldn't help but notice, and that is that on paper, they come off as pretty unlikable, and yet they aren't. Like, these two are essentially Hitler and Stalin light. They're wanted throughout the galaxy for their slaughtering of innocents, and find the idea of massacring entire societies not only acceptable but outright enjoyable. There's the aspect that they're underdogs, of course. They're two total clowns who are typically just a nuisance at the very most, but I think that a good portion of what makes them likable is referenced in the relationship the two have with each other. Outwardly, both characters present themselves as bloodthirsty tyrants with no regard for the lives or well-beings of others, but it's their very affinities with each other that blur these personas of theirs. I referred to the two as best friends earlier, and the reason for that is because that's the way they describe their relationship multiple times. This came off to me as pretty non-threatening. I mean, they've got matching weapons and everything. Like, can you imagine if Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine had matching BFF lightsabers? Now, the easy first argument you could make against this is that it's not exactly hard to act naive when you're an evil genius. It's been done before, it can be done again. Maybe they only protect each other to ensure their own survival, or to use the other for the world domination they crave so much. I think this can be dismissed with only one simple fact. They completely trust each other. In every single instance of them relaxing or sleeping, yes, every single time, pretty sus, they're doing so within arm's length of each other at the most. There are 3 times wherein Kaput just straight up falls asleep in Zösky's lap. They trust each other so much that they aren't afraid to be in their most vulnerable states while around each other. Not only that, but they display these pretty interesting behaviors when the other is concerned, something that they only ever express around each other. Empathy. Kaput in particular, the self-proclaimed god of destruction, is so uncharacteristically soft when Zösky is upset. In contrast, Zösky gets really outwardly distressed when he perceives something is wrong with Kaput and will often work to compromise with him or try to cheer him up in order to make him feel better. The fact that they have a bond like this is what suggests to me that they aren't quite as cold and heartless as they come off. Or maybe they're just idiots, which is about equally possible. Point is that the fact that 90% of the fan content you'll find of these guys is either like vaguely or overtly gay really says it all. These homies absolutely kiss each other goodnight. And there's this clip. I'll just let it play for you as a segue into the next section.
Turn the ship around! I got a craving for enslaving!
That's the Kaput I know.
Hey! Ooh, cut that! Stop hugging me!
Oh, you're so cute when you're angry.
So I finished the entire animated series within 2 days. When it was over, I still felt almost like I had missed something. I decided to chase this inclination, and the first place I went was back to the Wikipedia article. I noticed from the cover here, or maybe even just the text that's right at the top of the page, that Kaput and Zösky was originally a French comic series. As explained previously, there are 2 volumes in French and an English translation of the first, but I wasn't aware of this at the time. Miraculously enough, I quickly found the English volume on the Internet Archive and rented it straight away. Naturally, I read through all 80 pages in one sitting. The comic is about exactly what you'd expect. It's got that real comic-y feel to its writing, if that makes sense. Like, it's very chummy and I guess approachable would be the right word. Its humor is comforting like the comic section of any newspaper, and I feel like it knows that. It has this same humbleness to it that the cartoon does. A lot of its authentic feel comes from its art style. It's loose, it's messy, it's off-model, and it's unapologetic about this aspect. It's just free and fun, and obviously made by someone who cares about their medium. Now, you also get the feeling from this book that a lot of it was done spontaneously, and I mean that very affectionately. It has no real beginning or end. It's just a collection of short stories, and it really gives the impression that the author knows his talents and characters well enough to be confident in their abilities to speak for themselves. One of the first things I noticed just from the cover alone is that Kaput and Zösky's signature color-coded crisperizers are the same shade of green that doesn't really match much of anything. And halfway through the comic, they turn the shade of yellow present on Zösky. When I had first read it, I hadn't known why that that was, and it was something I questioned for quite a while, but after getting the timeline down, I'm now capable of explaining most of its oddities. Kaput and Zösky's weapons were both green in the original French volume. Sometime during the production of the animated series, there was a decision to make them color-coded, and then the second French volume comes out right as the last episodes are being produced. The English book contains both volumes, which is why it appears to just suddenly change for no reason. This still begs the question, however, of why they were changed in Volume 2 to yellow, when the stories in the comics are all adaptations of plots from the animated series. The cartoon was already out and running for a year. We can assume the second volume was made to be a companion to the show, so why the weird change? This is something I don't know, and we may never know. Now, I'm going to take you through the animated series real quick and point out some of its anomalies. I'll only be including things that I find interesting. This isn't even half of the show, but if you'd rather give it a watch for yourself and come back to this later, or if you're just not interested, then feel free to skip to the timestamp on the screen. However, I do encourage you to watch the rest of this video before deciding to consume any Kaput and Zösky media. Lastly, I'm going to be sorting every episode into a tier list, which I'll show both after this segment and at the end of the video. Alright, if you're still with me then, let's take a tour. Season 1, Episode 1, Segment 1. The beginning of all of this. It goes by PP Popcorn. I theorize that it's loosely adapted from this comic strip, just based on the designs of the creatures and their enthusiasm. At the end of this episode, Zösky mentions that crowds give him panic attacks, and this kind of goes to show you right off the bat that he's more prone to dramatics in general, like emotions, than Kaput is. One thing you'll notice throughout this show is that Zösky has a tendency to talk a lot of smack and then immediately back down the second things get hairy. But this panic attack stuff never really comes back. Maybe a bit too heavy for a mid-tier Nicktoon, but it makes for a fun headcanon. Shout out to Black Hole Bunny for the awesome fanfiction. Episode 2, The Great Gondazin, is a pretty by-the-book Kaput and Zösky plotline. The two go to conquer the seemingly harmless planet Alpha Pictoris, but the ruler turns out to have a bit more bite than they expected. Now, the only reason I'm bringing this up in the first place is because Zösky says porno stations, and I'm not sure how in the hell that happened. Like, it's in the Apple TV subtitles. It's real. I looked it up and found nothing but exactly what you'd expect, so it's not some weird term like boob tube or anything like that. There were episodes of this show considered unsuitable for television, so it's not like nobody cared, but I guess it just managed to slip under the radar. It's worth noting though that in French he says Swedish movies. I googled Die Film Suédois, and it doesn't appear to be any kind of slang either, so I guess the French did what they did best and surrendered to censorship on that one. Oh, and I think it's important that you know that Gondazin looks like this. Skipping over 3, we're headed straight to episode 4, The Ferocious Crutchians. This is the first episode chronologically to be censored by Nickelodeon, though I haven't been able to find out whether the entire episode had been banned or just the offending scene. In this episode, Kaput and Zösky get trapped in a schoolyard and lose their crisperizers. Oh, and a quick note, these two lose their weapons pretty frequently throughout the show, so I've got no idea if they just have a lot of backups or always get them back off screen or what. It's best not to think about it, honestly, because there's no way anybody else did. Now, the reason this episode was censored is because Kaput challenges the kid in charge of the schoolyard to a literal game of challenge pissing. The less said about that, the better, so let's move on. Episode 5 is called Squishy Squids, and it's one of my favorite episodes, because it's pretty unique in the way that it showcases this other side to Kaput and Zösky's dynamic that's rarely ever explored. How does one react when the other is in emotional distress? In this episode, Zösky is feeling depressed and unfulfilled, longing for some stability for once, which is kinda interesting in itself, but I think what's far more notable is how Kaput's demeanor noticeably changes. He's gentle and cooperative with Zösky and makes multiple attempts at cheering him up throughout the episode, acting particularly jovial and optimistic, and doesn't argue with him like he ordinarily does, even when Zösky raises his voice at him. It's not like Kaput's gone totally soft either. He still attempts to shoot the inhabitants of the planet immediately, and shows characteristic impatience with them. This geniality is purely for Zösky, and I think that's really sweet. As much of a bastard as Kaput is, he clearly cares for his best friend, and it goes the other way as well. Zösky is kind of a wuss, but he jumps into action the second he thinks Kaput is in danger, prying open this enormous clamshell with nothing but his bare hands. Oh, and he also freaks out at the idea of Kaput getting married to the planet's queen because, and I quote, "a woman would get between them and destroy their friendship." Sure thing, man. Episode 6, Carrots Galore, is one I'm only really bringing up because it's quite the product of its time. I'll just play a little clip for you here and you'll see what I mean.
The kind of Majesty's meal has arrived. Carrot salad. Carrots rishi. Bon appetit, your lordship.
Yeah, there goes half of their Vancouver audience. Parental discretion advised is an episode where Kaput gets cancelled for calling someone a dwarf. Very epic. The next episode is Booga Booga, and it's another one that showcases Kaput's softer side. In this episode, the two try to take over an alien planet ruled over by a ghost. There's this one scene where the two are in bed. Zösky's fast asleep, but Kaput remains awake. Openly frightened, he says this in an attempt to calm himself. I mostly just thought this was endearing.
Are you asleep? You know the great thing about buddies, real buddies, is that you can count on them, huh?
And I also really like the animation in this episode. I think it's just fun to watch. And skip, here we go. Planet Clean, episode 11. It's this episode where we're first introduced to one of the only reoccurring characters in the show, good old Crazy Joe. It opens with the two fleeing from the crazy space redneck, Kaput claiming that Joe swore he'd cream them someday. It's revealed later that Kaput borrowed 1 million bruzoofs from him, which is the universe's currency. This is all we get in terms of their history. The rest is a pretty by-the-book episode, but anything that gives us a peek into anything related to a backstory is more than welcome. 2 episodes later, The Insider's about Vor. To my parents and teachers watching this, do not Google that unless I'm in the room with you to see your reaction. Next. I'm not entirely sure, but I suspect that Now You See Me, Now You Don't may have been another episode that was censored on Nicktoons. I'm basing this entirely off of the fact that there's another scene involving urine, though it's a lot less explicit than the one in The Ferocious Crutchians, and more of just an excuse to get them to stop on a new planet than any sort of joke. It's actually a pretty funny episode, another one of my childhood favorites. Episode 19, LK13, is about our 2 anti-heroes crash landing on a prison planet inhabited entirely by criminals. They get their ship stolen and team up with some aliens to get it back. It's a good exploration of Kaput and Zösky's criminal tendencies, as well as showcasing Kaput's skills regarding hand-to-hand combat. It's just generally an episode I enjoy a lot. It's lots of fun. Discotecus is weird because it implies Zösky has hair. In another episode, Kaput makes fun of Zösky for not having hair. Does not make sense. Too confusing. Moving on. Kaput is Indisposed is an episode in which Kaput jumps out of the spaceship before it lands because he's a detriment to not only everybody else's safety, but indisputably his own as well, and suffers a concussion. This is a good episode in terms of interpersonality between Kaput and Zösky, where we get to see how the latter fares when his partner is out of order. It's also home to what is undoubtedly the gayest scene in the entire series. I played it for you earlier as a segue between sections. It's this one.
That's the Kaput I know.
2 episodes after this one is another series peak, and that is, oh no, this is my planet. Kaput and Zösky crash land on planet La Mama, the place Zösky was born. La Mama is ruled by a strict matriarch, Zösky's mom, who is clearly very respected by the planet's inhabitants. Zösky is terrified of her. The way he freaks out when he realizes the planet he's landed on is something I find so interesting. It implies to me that he had a difficult life growing up, and perhaps that's why he's a criminal in the first place. I could talk about this episode forever, but my point is that this kind of backstory and world building is not something we ever see again, and I adore it. I would love to see something similar done with Kaput, but in the meantime, we've got our headcanons. For Bad or For Worse is an episode that I feel has more going to it than initially meets the eye. It opens with Kaput and Zösky having an argument about the latter always being in charge. It's always interesting to see how these two work conflicts out, but what happens is that Kaput is given 3 wishes from Zösky and uses his first to pick up a hitchhiker named Zabubu. Kaput's immediately smitten with her and antics follow suit. If I were to choose one side character to make reoccurring, it would be Zabubu. She's remarkably similar to Kaput and Zösky in which she has criminal tendencies, she has no issue stealing their ship, and even has her partner she's loyal to and her brother. Zösky's reactions to her are interesting as well. He's immediately and openly scornful of her, remaining in a bad mood for the rest of the episode, but goes along with things because of the promise he made to Kaput earlier. There's a lot of things you could analyze here, but the point of the matter is I want to see some Zabubu appreciation going on, because she would be a really fun foil to these two. I gotta generate some incorrect quotes later. Skipping over another straight to this real oddity of an episode called The Legend of Kaput and Zösky. Apparently in this world, it's canon that Kaput and Zösky have their own series of comics, all illustrated by this dude who's very clearly supposed to be Louis Trondheim. Just thought this was kinda cute. Kaput Sees Red is actually a sequel to one of the last episodes in the series called The Flabyurk. Not only that, but the one directly after it, Return to Cuckoo Land, is also a sequel to a later episode. Why they're spaced out in reverse like this is one of my biggest questions. The layout and ordering of Kaput and Zösky is one of the show's largest anomalies, as well as one of the hardest to figure out. Trust me, it was not easy to find information about this. The next sections of this video will take you through the story behind that, however, so we're moving on. 2 episodes later is Glutina, an interesting episode about Zösky reuniting with an old girlfriend of his. Glutina was someone Zösky dated in high school, and when they run into each other at the supermarket, they immediately become smitten with each other again. There's a lot I could say about this episode because it really gives us an interesting look at both Kaput and Zösky's characters, but that's not really relevant, so I'll spare you the brain rot. It's a fascinating episode. Also, fun fact, this episode was unavailable on the Little Amigos YouTube channel. The only reason that you're able to watch it on there today is because I emailed them about it. They'd accidentally uploaded a duplicate of another episode instead. Now, we're skipping ahead quite a bit to our next relevant episode, one called Home Sweet Home. This was one of my favorites as a kid, one that always stood out to me just based on how really weird it was. This is a story wherein Kaput and Zösky upgrade their ship and gives them some kind of wild warp drive, allowing them to explore past the galaxy. There's a lot of surreal imagery in this one, my favorite being this ominous void full of hundreds of frozen, murmuring mirrors of Kaput and Zösky with mix and match features. Love this stuff. The one straight after, At Arm's Length, is also kind of strange. It's about this planet where you never see the inhabitants in full, only their arms. I really love the background art in this one, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because there's this one little vocal addition to a common music track that never happens again. It got totally stuck in my head as a kid. It's just a fun little oddity that I wanted to share with you. I love the music in this series. Cosmoscope is weird. It's Click by Adam Sandler and Kaput and Zösky have gay sex on screen. Next. 2 episodes after that is Hocus Pocus, an episode where Zosky's mistaken as a rabbit and kidnapped by magicians. This episode, I believe, is notable for this specific scene that's really weirdly emotional. The magicians use the rabbits for their tricks, make them disappear, and Kaput and Zösky are under the impression that this is gonna be the last time they ever see each other again. The way Kaput starts to panic and bargain just stings a little. Oh, and it's also the 3rd instance wherein Kaput cross-dresses, so make of that what you will. Robinson Hood is good stuff. Not much relevant to say about it, but I want to share this lovely clip with you of the softest Kaput I've ever seen, just to boost morale.
Look, we didn't lose everything. Look at there's enough here for us to start a shell collection.
Gotta Move is, on its own, a pretty unremarkable episode. The reason I'm bringing this up is because of one detail, and let's see if you can catch it before I tell you what it is. Alright, time's up. The inhabitants bear a striking resemblance to Kaput. Unlike Zösky, we know basically nothing about Kaput's backstory, so in here lies a possible clue. The only problem with this is the pretty obvious fact that Kaput doesn't acknowledge the aliens nor the planet in a matter differently than he would any other. We could maybe guess that Kaput's race is widespread across many planets, which is something we see with quite a few races, including the Lamamians. So I went briefly searching across some crowds to see if I could find anybody, but the only thing I could find was this chick at the end of For Bad or For Worse. But I digress, let's move on. About 4 episodes later is this really weird obligatory Christmas story. Apparently Santa is just real in this universe, but only one of the duo recognize him, so this implies that either he's recognized culturally across the galaxy and Kaput is just an idiot, or Zösky is super into social studies. Either is possible, maybe both, though I personally think Zosky's more of a theater kid. This episode is also where we get the greatest scene in the entire series. You are welcome. My friends and I have abused this gift to the point where it could be considered a cruel and unusual punishment. It's just so good though, look at that doobie. Speak Up is another instance in which we see a noticeable drop in animation quality. This episode just looks kind of bad. It's an entertaining one, I actually like it a lot. It was one of my favorites as a kid, again, but there's definitely something being done differently with it. The lines get thinner, the coloring feels flatter, and as we near the end of the series, this is something we begin to see more and more often. Its sister episode, Thick and Thin, looks even worse in my opinion. There's something about the environment, probably due to the color scheme, that makes it look really cheap, and that's something hard for me to look past.
Also, this episode is about inflation.
However, weirdly enough, I find that the last episode in this triplet works better with the shifted art style, likely because the environments are a lot more interesting. There are also some great expressions, I think. Speaking of which, I'd like to touch upon Cuckoo Land because, if you recall earlier, we talked about an episode titled Return to Cuckoo Land. Yeah, earlier. This is actually the prequel to another story from about 30 episodes ago. Why is it ordered like this? I have absolutely no idea. But stay tuned and you may find we do, interestingly enough, have a tentative lead. In the meantime, I'd like to talk about this really bizarre episode called Space Zeros, another favorite of mine. This is one I'd put in the same vein as Home Sweet Home, as it's just kind of surreal in its imagery and premise. It opens up with Kaput and Zösky landing in this weird ethereal cloudscape and coming across what could be best described as the universe's non-Euclidean control room. They try to make their own planet and end up, as usual, failing miserably. Oh, and it's in this episode where they unintentionally come up with a catchy shipping name.
How do you like Kaputsky? That sounds kind of nice, don't you think?
I'm sure the fandom thanks you for your service, Space Heroes. A bit later, and we get Hippie Hippie Hooray, and if Speak Up looked bad, this episode just looks straight up unfinished. It's all in flat colors, something you'd never see before or after this point, where even the low-budget episodes had some measure of shading. I think the premise being okay saves this episode from being a complete failure, but these next three, oh boy. Season 3, Episode 9 is the second to last and, like every episode, a trifecta of shorts, or what I have been and will continue to be referring to as episodes, just to keep things more concise. Consisting of It's a Mad, Mad, Mad Universe, Meetings, 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 and Mom, We're on TV. This terrible threesome is almost entirely unwatchable, and it's solely because of what they've done with the visuals. These episodes, for some bizarre reason, are stitched together scenes from previous ones with new voice clips dubbed over top. Consequently, this means that the plots and rhythms are really unhinged, and sometimes you'll get scenes like this wherein the voice actors are awkwardly trying to make dialogue fit in with lip sync that was just not at all intended for it.
Look, the sun's going down fast! Dang, very fast! We better run if we want to leave before dark!
The fact that this is a thing that happens at all is really weird, but what's even stranger is that this collection of episodes is the only one that has this problem. The last 3 episodes of this series are more or less normal. I'm not sure what was going on here, but I've never seen anything quite like it before. Now, there is one thing that Mom, We're on TV offers if you're into character building, and that is a very brief explanation of how Kaput and Zösky began doing what they do. If you care about that, go check out the characters' background sections on the wiki. It's all as it should be over there. Otherwise, these 3 are just a total disaster, definitely the series' absolute low point. After that train wreck of a trifecta, the series comes limping back with what is probably the episode with the worst animation, the Flabyurk. Unlike Hippie Hippie Hooray, this one does have basic shading, but there's something about the movements and how off-model the characters are that just make it look especially cheap and awful. What's even weirder though is that this is another prequel episode, this time of Kaput Sees Red. The Flabyurk just has a lot of weirdness to it. It almost feels AI generated sometimes, and I'm comfortable in saying that its sequel is far better. In fact, it's good that this one is so near the end. Okay, Machines Unite is only one that I'm bringing up because first of all, I found these absolutely awesome storyboards by David Garcia on ArtStation. I was absolutely not expecting anything even close to this, and I'm just so stoked about it. So thank you, David, if you're watching this. Why they're in French when the episodes are animated for English, no clue. But they're sweet. Unfortunately, this one has a similar animation issue to the Flabyurk, though you could argue Machines Unite has it worse because of this one scene where the foreground is accidentally laid behind the characters. How embarrassing. And finally, the very last episode, Excalibut. Interestingly enough, this is one of the ones I had on DVD, and if I remember correctly, it was actually boxed with Kaput's red, which, if that's true, just really begs the question why they didn't throw the episode's prequel in there as well. Clearly order doesn't actually matter, so why not? Thankfully this episode is a bit of a return to form. The animation's still a bit off, but it looks better than its sisters, with its really nice backgrounds, and is additionally written fantastically. It's actually home to one of my favorite lines in the whole series too, so despite things getting rough near the end, I would say that ultimately the series does end on a pretty good note.
Water! I'm busy, you pile of crud! Get a rendezvous with destiny! Evil being! You flatter me.
Okay, we're all done with that. Hope that wasn't too tedious or uninteresting. I know I ramble a lot, but what can I say? I'm excited. Oh, and here's the tier list. Start with S through B, and the rest is skippable unless you're super into it. You're welcome. So, with all that said and done, I still obviously had a lot of questions left. And where do you go when you have a question? Our good old friend Google, of course. Like all obscure fandoms, the most extensive database about this show appeared to be a fandom wiki, or a wikia as they used to be called, and I keep calling them that anyway, just force of habit. And this is probably about where the mania first began to set in. Fandoms. We all love to hate them, but we also take them for granted. You can find answers to any question you could possibly ask about Spider-Man, Star Wars, even what I consider my primary fandom, Gravity Falls, but not every IP gets the luxury of a fanbase sprawling millions of people all around the world. I think I had gotten really spoiled by these things. If I ever didn't recognize a cipher from Journal 3, I could just stop by the Gravity Falls wiki and they'd tell me not only what it said, but what it related to, what cipher key needed to be used to decode it, and sometimes even a handful of fan theories. Now keep that in mind while I show you the withered corpse that was the Kaput and Zösky wiki and this article describing one of its namesake characters. Oh boy. The wiki was this garish, generic plot of poorly formatted information. The first page I landed on, Zösky's, was probably the least offensive, and yet it only left me with more questions than answers. It listed that Zösky was 16 years old, something that went completely unsourced, with even some guy from the year before asking for an explanation, but it was presented so purposefully that I didn't quite have the guts to remove it or discredit it entirely. I moved on to Kaput's page, and it had the same exact thing, an age with no source. Unlike Zösky's though, it claimed that Kaput was only 7 years old. Another person in the comments of this page was rightfully doubtful, but the fact that both this comment and the one on Zösky's page went unanswered for a full year gives me the impression that these bizarre claims may never be verified, or at least not by the original poster. This is a running theme on this wiki. These very purposeful fun facts that I have no idea how to verify. And the thing is, I know that some of the people who contributed to these pages know something that I don't, because there are several images from the comics that do not appear in the issues I have, and I have all of them. These images aren't crappy photographs either. These are high quality scans that could pass for digital art if I didn't know any better. So I wondered if maybe they were taken from somewhere else, because let's be real, the wiki isn't the classiest place in the world. I popped it into reverse image search and got 3 results. 2 from the wiki where I'd found it, and 1 from a completely dead website. Put another 2 of these images into both Google's reverse image search and TinEye, and could find nothing. TinEye at least showed me that there were far more of these dead websites than Google would reveal, and this quickly became a running theme that I'd have to get used to. This series was brief, fleeting, and just generally obscure, having only been on the air for a couple years, and most of the discussion around it had vanished to the sands of time. It was this realization that flipped something in my brain. One of the things I find the most viscerally terrifying is losing information forever. Something about a piece of knowledge that was there in somebody's mind, in somebody's life, but for whatever reason was never preserved disturbs me. This is prevalent all throughout history, from the habits of ancient cavemen to modern lost media. It was here that I realized that time could very well be running out for Kaput and Zösky. I had a chance to do something here. Yeah, it'd be a meaningless blip in French-Canadian history kind of something, but like, it's still something. Someone out there had the same experience as I did about this show, and someday they may want to relive it. And when they do, I want to make sure they're able to find out all of the things that I have. And that was that. I began my contributions to the wiki immediately. I began by trying to get a scale of the fandom. I'd already done a little surfing on Google Images beforehand, of course, and I did find some really fantastic fan art, but it was few and far between, and none of it was all that recent. Shout out to the incorrect Kaput and Zösky quotes Tumblr, which is not only legendary, but actually still posts once in a while. I went sleuthing in the wiki's history logs and image files to see who the most active members were, and quickly learned that the wiki was founded by a user named Zösky's concubine, who hadn't been active since 2017. Their profile was questionable, but hey, free country, more power to you. The main issue was that their English was not very good. It made the wiki read super awkwardly. I knew this was something I could definitely fix, so I had already sort of made up my mind that I was going to be a contributor, but it was the community tab that really sold it to me. Admins, none. Wiki representatives, none. Recent contributors, none. I really kind of felt like I was all alone. Like I was in a little spaceship drifting through infinity. It wasn't all completely hopeless. The last edit had been a couple months ago in September. Well, it was a couple of months ago at the point in this journey, but that didn't discredit the wiki's status of dead any further. It seemed that every 3 or so months someone would add an image or two and then stop, which was honestly still more than I expected, but they clearly hadn't been doing all that much if half the pages still looked like this. This wiki needed some direction, and I figured I might as well help it out. Fandom has this feature where you can request to adopt a dead wiki. I immediately put in an application. 24 hours later, and I had gotten a reply from a Fandom admin. Protocol says I need to have been making contributions for at least a week, but the moment that week comes up, all I need to do is remind them and it's all mine. Interjection, I am now the proud wiki mom, and now it looks like an actual wiki instead of something auto-generated by a robot. I even made a logo and a favicon, you're welcome. I started by editing the character pages, cause that was easy. I knew these characters by now, and additionally knew where half of the text on their pages was copy-pasted from. A quick cleanup of bad grammar and questionable images, and they were perfectly acceptable. Then I moved on to the episodes, and suddenly things became a lot less simple.
Okay, next. Famous planet history of cruel and merciless dictators. 7 letters, starts with G-O. G-O, G-O. 7 letters. Oh, I can't believe this. I have no idea. G-O.
Yeah, maybe it's Gooston. We just passed it.
G-O-O-S-T-O and Gooston! That's it!
Kaput and Zösky has 26 episodes, each compiled of 3 shorts, so they're 78 shorts. I've been calling them episodes. I began working on the pages for them in order, starting with the undisputed first, PP Popcorn, also called Pop Popcorn, and Pop Popcorn, depending on where you look. And frankly, the fact that it has like 3 different names should give you a good idea of how weird this is going to be. The YouTube channel it was uploaded on was my reference, figuring that they must have at least some idea of what they're doing if the episodes are allowed to exist on the platform at all. And yeah, it went well. I even attempted a transcript because I looked and there was no script for any episode anywhere. Some words tripped me up, one of the first in the episode being Zösky listing out locations in space, which are, of course, not real or even composed of real words. I was under the impression that there was no streaming service that I could watch it on, and additionally no piracy sites, so I more or less made peace with the fact that I'd have to play things by ear. YouTube did provide captions, though they were auto-generated, and that paired with Zösky's fruity accent rendered the feature totally useless, but oh well. It was secondary to my main goal regardless. So, PP Popcorn, done. Back to the YouTube playlist. Next, Bobo Bibola, got it. After that, The Grey Gonizin, cool. Then The Legend of Kaput and Zösky, piece of cake. And after that, oh dear. I did not have many sources to work with here. At the moment, I was under the impression that it'd be near impossible to find an in-order list of episodes anywhere except the YouTube channel, but my other main source, the wiki itself, immediately let me know that I had been going about things completely wrong. After The Legend of Kaput and Zösky should have been The Ferocious Crutchians according to the playlist, but a page for this episode already existed on the wiki. Episode 4. Any toddler worth their building blocks can tell you that 4 is right next to 5, so I figured it was decently safe to assume a typo. If that had been all, I'd have likely just continued doing things YouTube's way, but there was one other string of info present on the page. Its sister episodes. The Legend of Kaput and Zösky should have logically been there, but no. Instead, squishy squids and carrots galore. The other pages had been so janky that they hadn't even given me information about any sister episodes, and so it took me completely off guard when this one had, like, actual information for me. Information that I did not know the source of. This is also when I began to remember that the YouTube channel listed duplicate episodes and was even missing one altogether. Interjection, I couldn't find a place to put this. I ad-libbed some of it earlier when talking about the episode in question, but I emailed the YouTube channel about the missing episode and they put it up about a week later. So yeah, Glutina is now available to be viewed by the public. You're welcome. Clearly between me, the YouTube channel, and the wiki, one of us was missing something. So I crawled back into Google and looked to see what sources could have a list for me. The publishing company's site provided nothing but images, which were great for site decoration and laptop wallpapers, but that was about it. And then I found IMDb. Perfect, right? Well, except that past segment 1, it didn't say anything about the rest of the shorts in its block, merely vague descriptions. Here's where I hit the first roadblock. Every other source either did the exact same thing as the IMDb page, or listed only the episodes on the DVDs, which did not contain the entire series. Eventually, I settled on the Amazon video listing, figuring that it was about as trustworthy as it can get. It had all 26 collections of 3, and even listed their seasons. Now, all that was left was to figure out which episodes went together. I started a new note on my computer and began going through them all. Some of them were obvious, like Kaput and Zösky encounter a shady salesman, is obviously referring to the space salesman, or Kaput and Zösky land on a planet inhabited by hippies is referencing hippie hippie hooray, but others were not so much. There were several along the lines of Kaput and Zösky actually win this time, which could be any number of stories. And episode 2 even had the audacity to pull an and more. By the time I'd gone through them all, I still had about 12 misplaced episodes and another 5 that were maybes. The process of trying to shove these misfits in somewhere was like the world's least fair logic puzzle. Once again, some were easier than others, but by the time I had gotten to the 4th misplaced segment, everyone seemed to be rife with more uncertainty. It was then, as I was staring at the 3rd story I had placed under "This is the Victory" episode maybe, that I knew this wasn't gonna work. I had to find some way to watch those full episodes from the official source. Amazon Prime Video had them. I knew they did because not only did the series have a page and a full list of episodes, but it had a review. One guy from the United States posted in 2014. I changed my VPN and even the region on my laptop to America, but it just simply was not available to watch anymore. I jumped all over the place from France to India and nothing was working. The only lead I had was that one review, and I'd already exhausted it. Somewhere over the last 7 years, I had missed my opportunity. Or, at least, I thought I had. I was Googling the show again in a last-ditch effort to find a lead, and discovered that it was still available, but only on an obscure little service you probably haven't heard of called Apple TV. Once again, it displayed as unavailable, but I wasn't giving up that easily. I sent a psychotic message to some of my American friends asking if they could see it available for purchase, and the answer was a resounding yes.
Trust me, we're going to take over power here without effort. But first, we have to discreetly get into the building.
Over here.
So I had to find some way to access the American Apple Store. It's 2021 at the time. This shouldn't be all that hard. Right? Well, I quickly found out that Surfshark wasn't gonna help me through this one. Seriously, why am I even paying for a VPN if it can't get me past the border? Oh well, perhaps the shark would have to stick to Netflix. In the meantime, I began troubleshooting. It was made pretty clear that what I needed was an American Apple ID, and once again I underestimated just how difficult this would be, which seems to be a running theme in this journey. My VPN was set, my computer's region was changed, and according to Google I was, indeed, now as good as inside America. America. I went to make an Apple ID, set it up with my right-hand man, Gangweed, and there was once again a new problem. Apple required that I link it with a phone number, and that phone number had to be valid, because they would be sending me a confirmation code upon registration. My immediate first idea was to simply use an online burner phone number. Those surely had to exist, and it turns out they do. But as we've learned, nothing's ever really that simple. All of the top results had been completely exhausted of Apple accounts, and the site's registration wasn't falling for it. This number has received too many confirmation codes, it'd tell me, and I was beginning to get concerned that the site would catch my bluff. Further, I dug through the Google results for burner numbers, and over again they failed me. Too many codes, too many codes, too many codes. Eventually I found a site that worked, and I described the feeling as akin to being lost in a cave for 5 days and finally seeing something that wasn't just absolute pitch darkness. Unfortunately, this time it was the site itself that didn't work. The number went through, I refreshed the page for about 10 minutes, but it would show me no text message. I kept the site open but continued searching on another tab, figuring that eventually it had to work. Eventually I'd end up having to crawl back to this last surviving usable website, but thankfully it never came to that. I'm not gonna tell you which site I used, but if you're ever stuck in a situation like this, I'm sure you'll be able to find it. It worked like a charm, and finally, I had my counterfeit American Apple ID. I felt as if I just defused a bomb, but I wasn't quite out of the woods yet. Now, I actually needed to purchase the show, and there was no way I could fake a valid credit card, billing address, and sufficient funds to buy things using it. Luckily, I'd remembered something from my first Google, and that was that I didn't need to input any payment information to receive gift cards. So, guess I'd be buying myself some gift cards. I got a $25 card and sent it off to Gangweed's email address after some fiddling with the garbage website. After waiting a good 5 minutes for Apple to send an email, it finally came through, and I hopped back on the Apple TV store, clicked purchase, went to input the gift card, and region locked. You can't redeem a gift card outside of its respective country. So, I had just wasted $25. Fantastic. But I was a tech-savvy kid living in the modern age. There was no way that I couldn't buy an American card somewhere. I wrestled with some crappy gift card sites for a bit and got most of my money back, minus like $4, but that's less than my average meal at Tim Hortons, eh? And then discovered a page made exactly for what I was looking for. Finally, my luck had turned for the better. I bought a gift card with 25 American dollars on it and loaded it into Apple TV. Success. Gangweed now held American funds. I purchased the show's 3 volumes, and I officially owned the last complete, streamable collection of Kaput and Zösky. I downloaded the entire thing to my hard drive, returned back to Canada feeling remarkably accomplished, and promptly went to bed because it was midnight on a weekday and I was ready for a long rest. This opened even more doors for me than I thought it would. Not only did I now have the list of episodes in order, but they even came with subtitles. As I said earlier, I had made a half-baked attempt to transcribe a couple of episodes, but it was hard when each one was full of made-up words like bagoodles and zding, so this was like an enormous godsend. So yeah, I went through hell and back to retrieve these episodes. And to conclude the section, my search history now looks shadier than the average winter on Vancouver Island. Hope these two are happy because it was all for them, and I'm very dubious on the legality of this, but Nintendo hasn't caught me for piracy yet, so I think I'll be good. With my newfound MP4 files, a million doors had been opened for me, and with them came a frenzy. I was too deep into this now, I needed to know everything. I perused pages of sites looking for new crumbs of information. I began work on an archive of everything I had found. I analyzed the characters and scoured some of the scripts I had transcribed looking for hints of lore. Having more or less conquered the animated series, my attention had all been consumed by the other half of the property, which was the comic. There was this cover to a second volume of the French book that I'd see every so often. This one of Kaput and Zösky confronting a cactus monster, and I had no idea where it came from. I couldn't figure out if it was half of the English version or entirely new stories. I couldn't find a place anywhere to take a peek inside, and it drove me crazy. I even told Google to show me results in French in hopes of finding answers, but it just wasn't happening. I had more or less given up on this endeavor after a while, but I finally found myself a new lead. It must have been my 10th time on Google Images searching for Kaput and Zösky that I came across a French eBay listing, and it showed up on Google Images with this thumbnail. And there it was. I had found the source of one of the Orphan Wiki images, one of the images that I couldn't find anywhere else on the internet. Now, as stated before, I had the English release of the comic, and this image had definitely not been in it. This was something completely different. Upon visiting the link, one of my suspicions was confirmed, and the other debunked. The image had been from that second French volume. This implies that the book holds completely new material separate from the English one. This was an entire new frontier, and I could only speculate what else I might find in that book. Maybe more episodes have been based off of the comic than I had originally thought. Maybe those other images I could find no source for had been from this volume. Maybe I'd find all new stories and graphics. Maybe I'd even be thrown another curveball, like, what if the English volume was a compilation of the two French ones, but stories had been picked and chosen from both, leaving the first French volume with original stories as well, stories that I'd never seen or heard from. The listing was for approximately $30 Canadian. I asked the lister if he would ship to Canada, and he agreed to for merely a couple dollars more. And above all of this, the book was even signed by the artist Eric Cartier, paired with a completely original illustration. Interjection. By the way, this says, rah, 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 bah, 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 bah. This was an incredible opportunity. I purchased it immediately. So, living in the modern world, not being a baby, you probably know that global shipping around the holidays was kind of a disaster. The book was set to arrive around the 8th of December and ended up not doing that. It was about 9 days late, but that's totally fine. I'm just glad it arrived at all because the paranoid little voice in the back of my head was worrying it had gotten lost in the mail. Here's a little clip I recorded of my first experience with the book, and I apologize in advance because it is vertical, but what can I say? It's a phone video. Yes! Green bean and football! Yeah! Woo! Yeah! Alright, come on. We gotta do this together. This may be the first English documentation of this. Or the only remaining one, at least. Oh, look at that. That's the first thing. There's the signed page. Look, it's a whole ass drawing too, an original drawing. That's the photo from the wiki that I couldn't reverse image search.
Oh my god.
So let's see. This is it. This is just seeing if this is new or if this was translated into English. So let's see. It was translated into English. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I'm totally happy with this. It's completely. That noise is me high-fiving my sister, by the way, not slapping her. So yeah, what did I end up learning from this? Well, first of all, the English version was just a compilation of the two French ones. This volume was pretty damn short. It was around 30 pages and didn't have the little bonus comics between stories. Additionally, I noticed that every story was one that was also in the cartoon. This made me suspect that this book likely came after the show, which was correct, but I hadn't confirmed it at the time. Meanwhile, I'd been working on the wiki. I severely underestimated how hard this was. Not only does Fandom use this weird markup that seems to be exclusive to the site, but most wikis have like a team of nerds working on it, and this was a lot for one person to do by themselves. I know jack about HTML, let alone Fandom's weird markup, so I spent many hours trying to figure out how to align blocks of text or figure out how templates work. The latter honestly is such a pain that it gave me a headache, even though all I had to do was import a page from an existing wiki. It took me about a week to make a page for all 78 shorts, and they were about as bare bones as they get. So I'm trying not to think too hard about the fact that each one will need a transcript too. The amount of appreciation I have for the SpongeBob wiki alone right now is astounding. Didn't quite know where in the script to put this, but there was one other person I'd occasionally see around the wiki, so shout out to Hobby Pony for all the random PNGs. I'm sure they'll go to good use somewhere.
Oh, look at that. Aren't they cute?
Nous être Kaput et Zösky.
Kaput et Zösky. Kaput et Zösky. Kaput et Zösky.
Oui, un peu. Je suis non génial, omelette du fromage, and that's really all I can do for memory alone. I hope you enjoyed my Canadian party trick. One afternoon, I decided it was time for another Googling. This time, however, I wanted to try something different. It was time to go all in and visit the French internet. I turned on my VPN, opened an incognito window, and scrolled for hours, trying not to use my translator, but inevitably giving in anyway, as I'm just a little bit too American, it seems. I ended up finding a good handful of the French dubs on YouTube, as well as a list of episodes with their French titles, which was pretty cool. Zösky sounds even gayer than usual. And it was then that I made up my mind to download a couple language apps and begin learning. I had always been interested in learning French. I'm looking to pursue a career in a medical field, albeit one regarding animals, and because my country is bilingual, I know it would give me an edge in the competitive veterinary scene. It was this that encouraged me to finally take the leap. Salut et bonsoir, France. J'étudie et ça va très bien. But we're not here for that. Let's go over what I've learned regarding our space invaders. I dove deeper and deeper, finally somehow even making it to the Dutch internet. There wasn't much of value in a lot of what I found, but I did discover a website called Comic Vine that I could have sworn came down from the heavens alongside a choir of angels. This site is a mostly complete archive of all of Kaput and Zösky's appearances in terms of comics. So let's go over what I found. Kaput and Zösky appear in at least 4 different comics. Mixed Strip Magazine, a popular French publication, The Nimrod, one of Trondheim's own publications, M, and, of course, Kaput and Zösky. In Mix, they appeared 4 different times, which is already impressive, but in the aforementioned M, they tripled that number with 11 appearances. These guys had made the rounds for sure. Comic Vine claims that Kaput and Zösky first appeared in Mixed Strip Magazine number 4, and sure enough, there it is, mentioned right on the cover. This was gonna be my next rabbit hole, I already knew it. And so I spent the next 2 hours looking for a digital issue of Mixed Strip Magazine number 4. No dice. I found someone claiming to sell it on some weird nerdy comic collector's site for only $1, but after accidentally ordering it, I never got a response as far as I can tell. Oh well. I moved on to Nimrod featuring It'd Be Easier Than Just M, and that's when I found something. Lewis's website. It's a primitive webpage, entirely in French, and definitely invokes the sense that it was designed by an older pre-internet artist. It's also got this very cute little menu bar made of art supplies. I was mentally hitting myself for not thinking of looking for such a site earlier, and immediately dove straight in. Sure enough, there was a page for its publications. Trondheim had made a lot of stories, and it took a little longer than I would have thought to find Kaput and Zösky. But, sure enough, there it was. I hovered my mouse over it, trying to click it, you can't by the way, and saw this. 1995. Kaput and Zösky didn't start as its own comic. It began as a couple strips for other publications. I outlined the history of these series earlier in this video, but this is the point where I discovered that it had started 7 years before I thought it had. This also answered another question of mine, one that hadn't even occurred to me, but every story in the second book was adapted from the show. Democracy, Kaput is Indisposed, Globin 2, Cabbage Patch Kids, and The Space Salesman, they were all existing episodes. But easily the most interesting thing I found was this. Louis Trondheim's official forum. It was still active, and posting on it was the big man himself. I immediately made a forum account and rushed to my friends, heart racing at the possibility of actually talking to the man who defined my childhood. I had to do it, I knew I did, but not yet. It was late and I'm anxious, so I closed my laptop and went to sleep. The next day I told my teacher about what I had found. I was so anxious. That's just how I am when it comes to social situations, but she spoke frankly and told me, "You're asking about his creation. Of course he'll be happy to hear from you." She was right, and so I began to work. I spent that school day pouring my heart out into a letter. One I had decided I would email to him instead, as it had gotten too personal for a forum post, and when I had said what I needed to, alongside a myriad of questions, I drove back home feeling remarkably lighter. The next morning, I got an email back. It was a short little message just letting me know that he was on vacation, but would be back in a week to answer all of my questions. So, this was happening. Time passed remarkably slowly, it did. In the meantime, I decided to explore Tumblr a little more. There were two fan blogs that remained active. Kaput and Zösky, run by Brewlab Penguin, and Black Hole Bunny, ran by, well, Black Hole Bunny, but with a Y. These two were making content of all sorts. Doodles, fanfictions, memes, musings, and the platonic crush I had was immediate. I was diagnosed very early in my life with social anxiety disorder, so the only thing I could think about doing was posting something to the tag. Luckily, I happened to have some. Sure enough, it was reblogged by both of them with high praise, and I finally felt like I had found my people. I know you and Black Hole Bunny are likely watching this though, and so I just want to say that I love both of your stuff. Audible smiley face. Finally, 2 weeks had passed. I checked in on Lewis with a little "Hey, how's the vacation?" and the next day, there it was. I opened the email, my heart racing, and sure enough, he had done as he had promised. And so, without further ado, I present to you an exclusive interview with Kaput and Zösky's creator, Louis Trondheim. When was Kaput and Zösky first conceived? What inspired it?
The first page was done from a French weekly comics, Le Journal de Mickey. Mostly Disney stories, but sometimes other kinds of stuff. They decided to do a special SF issue and asked me to do one extra page. I don't know why I thought about stupid invaders, but I know I like comics when the main character is evil.
The comic was first published in French, but as far as I can tell, the animated series is created to be in English. If that is correct, why is this?
It was a co-production between France and Canada, so it was immediately done in 2 languages.
The published date of the first book in the Kaput and Zösky series is very close to that of the animated series. Was the comic created for the intention for it to become a cartoon, or did somebody approach you about an earlier work featuring them?
No. After the first page for Le Journal de Mickey, another comics monthly newspaper asked me for a few stories with the characters I wanted. I decided to use again Kaput and Zösky because I found them funny, and I thought it could be interesting doing them as perpetual losers. Then, a third comics journal asked me for original stories. I used Kaput and Zösky again. I had finally 15 pages worth of comics for Kaput and Zösky, and I asked the French publisher if he was interested in doing a book with it. I had some new stories, and the book was done. Meanwhile, I was working on the adaptation of another comic, Les Mouches, for a producer. When he saw Kaput and Zösky, he bought the rights to adapt it quickly for TV.
Something I find so unique and interesting about the series is how few reoccurring characters there are. When I think about any other cartoon in this era, there's always a point made to have an expansive world with large casts to fill up all the common niches it needs. But Kaput and Zösky is just really about, well, Kaput and Zösky, 2 best friends on an intergalactic road trip. Was this a conscious decision?
Yes. I wanted them as I watched Star Trek. A new episode, a new planet, and new characters.
Do Kaput and Zösky have any other friends?
I don't think it's possible.
How did Kaput and Zösky first meet?
I don't know.
We know that Zösky was born on La Mama, but where does Kaput come from?
I have no background upon these characters. Sorry, I'm an instinctive cartoonist. I have an idea, I draw it. I haven't needed to manage anything out loud before.
Are the yellow things on Zösky's head ears or antennae?
Ears.
Would I be allowed to share your responses to these questions in my documentary?
Sure, enjoy.
I would like to thank Louis first and foremost for his time. It means so much to me to have been able to talk with him. I now had what I needed to finish the series timeline that I presented to you in the beginning, and I finally felt like I understood. Some questions about the show remained unanswered. I think someday I might write to the folks involved with it, but that's a venture for another time. But of course, my most important question got answered, so I was more than satisfied. Zösky's got ears! Who would've thunk it? Is it weird that I kinda like them better as antennae? It's been a couple months since I started this adventure. I've made pages for every episode, organized them, curated hundreds of images to preserve episodes in vast galleries, and analyzed scene after scene after scene trying to better understand these characters I loved so much. I really did feel a sense of duty, especially when I was this far into it, and so my autistic brain latched onto this thing pretty intensely. I was hyper-fixated. I made fan art, I made headcanons and theories, and most notable for this segment, I talked to my friends about it. None of them knew what the hell it was, but that's okay because I basically just made the same joke over and over again anyway. My good old buddy pal Flynn.jpg shared my one brain cell when it came to humor, and so we'd often giggle and make gay jokes together. That's all he knew about it. It was French and kind of gay. And it just so happened that he was really into this other kind of gay French IP. Eventually he made a proposal. I'll watch yours if you watch mine. Sure, why the hell not? We started with his because it was a movie. This real rough and tumble animated story called MFKZ. It was badass. It had a world, a story, a cast of characters. The two main characters had similar unresolved homosexual tension. And when we were done, something peculiar happened. I began to feel like a bit of a clown. He had just shown me this thing with depth to it, something with substance that can be thought about long after the viewing is over, and all I had was this Y6 Nicktoons show with two characters and the depth of a coffee mug. Well, I figured the worst case scenario was he thinks it's stupid and we watch something else, so no reason to pull the plug and ruin the fun now. The next day we fired up the YouTube playlist and had a quick watch. Our viewing session lasted around 30 minutes until we switched to something else. I'd kind of expected that, and from a rational standpoint, it was whatever, who cares? But it's what another friend of mine who had decided to join us said that planted this really persistent seed in my mind. Episode 2 had just ended. My buddy Waffles laughed and lightly teased me. "You're nostalgia blind." My immediate reaction was, well, duh, of course nostalgia plays the biggest part in this. It's not like the show's some kind of masterpiece. And yet I continued to think about what she'd said for days after, weeks after. I'm still thinking about it now as I read this script. What is it that attracts me to this show? And does it have anything to offer without the nostalgia aspect? To answer this question, I first took a trip down memory lane. I asked myself, is there anything that's nostalgic to me that I actually don't like at all? Yes, there was. You may have heard of this little movie called Space Chimps. Now, there are a million reviews out there analyzing why this film fails to entertain and just generally spark any amount of joy, so I'm not going to bother getting into why. That, and I don't think it's relevant. All you need to know is that this is a movie I watched religiously as a child, revisited when I was an adult, and could not stand it. Nostalgia was, in these cases, a novelty. Something I could point at and go, huh, neat. Not even enough to enthrall me into not shutting the movie off halfway. So pure nostalgia was not what carried Kaput and Zösky for me. However, it's worth noting that the show isn't offensively bad like that movie is. Most people would say it's unremarkable. Just another forgotten Nicktoon made to quiet children for a few minutes, and maybe that allowed my nostalgia to bump up its rating in my mind. Now, the easiest argument here is to turn to any long-running IP. Star Wars, The Simpsons, Pokemon, all things that are largely considered shells of their former selves. But that's the key aspect here. They were good. Their glory days are past them, and in terms of creating new content, they're failing. Kaput and Zösky is as it has always been. Does this mean nostalgia isn't a big aspect? No, of course not. But there is something here. There's something about this show that has people looking back on it fondly. And while media analysis isn't something I'm adept in, I wanted to give it a shot anyway. I want people to understand this. I want them to join me in this adventure and bushwhack through the undergrowth alongside me. And the only way to do that is to figure out, at the core of this, what it means. Alright, pause. I have a confession to make. As I was writing this section, I met the nemesis of all creatives, the block. It was a bad block. It lasted months, and there was a point where I almost considered scrapping this entire project. It's true, I don't know how to analyze media, but I was beginning to wonder if that was something necessary at all. I was horribly conflicted and confused, lost in the sheer ocean of everything I had learned, and nothing was working. Is that a big spider? I needed help. And there was only one person who would understand. As we were driving home from school, I turned to my sister and asked her if she would be able to do me a favor. I explained everything, the pit I had dug myself, and she agreed to read over what I had done of the script. For an hour, we sat on my bed, reading while I sketched some funny little characters in return for her time. Every now and again, she'd smile or laugh or pipe up with praise for a part she enjoyed, and when she finally finished retracing my journey into the obscure, I asked her, "Is this analysis necessary?" And she told me this.
Nostalgia blindness is a term that gets tossed around a lot these days, and while there is merit to criticizing that worldview, there are people that demand media to be like the good old days that never really existed. But I think sometimes it's less nostalgia blindness and more this media shapes who you are. Like, if you watch SpongeBob constantly as a kid, you can't really review it in earnest. It shaped your humor, it's what made you laugh as a kid, and therefore, stuff like that is gonna make you laugh as an adult. There are some things that you grow up on that you still love without a doubt, but you kinda doubt anyone else would appreciate. That's just something you gotta accept. Nobody's gonna laugh at Audible, Google, Squirrel Boy like you did, or appreciate the nuanced gameplay and story of Eggs of Steel, Charlie's Excellent Adventure, because they didn't grow up on it.
Thank you. Want to say a funny word?
Yeah, okay. Minge flap.
And she was right. She was absolutely, completely right. I had begun this video for myself, to tell a story, but somewhere along the way, I had begun trying to make this appear to be something it wasn't. I wouldn't say it was unconsciously, but more autonomously that I wanted to excite other people about something that excited me so much. I wanted people to understand my dedication and my love, but I failed to examine my own bias because I was lonely. All of this passion, this enthusiasm, I had nobody to really share it with. I was so used to everybody understanding, everybody knowing, everybody loving, that I had trouble coping with the fact that this hyperfixation was simply my own. And that was okay. Maybe no one will ever again find this show in the wild. Maybe tomorrow the YouTube channel goes down without anybody ever noticing or caring. Maybe you, after finishing this video, will be the last person to ever think about it again. The goal in uploading this is to entertain, yes, to tell you a fun story you can put on while you draw, play a game, go to sleep, eat, whatever. But the reason this was created at all was for a different reason. I wanted to. I don't want this part of me forgotten in the sands of time, and I always want to remember, ultimately, that that is exactly what this is. A part of me. A small part of me. A little jigsaw in the 10,000-piece puzzle of my identity. But it's there regardless. I've done what I set out to do. I've told my story, and anything more than that would be a waste of both your time and mine, and so I leave you with this. Kaput and Zösky is a cute little kids show about two alien best friends on a road trip. It is unremarkable. It's largely forgotten by both the world and its creator. It is low budget. It probably isn't something you'd even think twice about. And it has made a permanent, meaningful home in both my identity as well as my heart. Thank you truly for watching, and I hope your own enjoyment of what others consider to be the mundane always stays.
Good night, Kaput.
And that's where this video was supposed to end. It's been a full year since I began writing the script. A lot has happened since then. I graduated, I got a job, I went to university, I met new friends, strengthened bonds with old ones, and even experienced the grief of losing some dear family. To put it briefly, things have been hard. This video has been long overdue, but I'm always thinking about it. Having my own little mysteries to solve has been oddly comforting, if not occasionally a bit maddening, and inevitably, I stumbled back to where I'd started a couple times. Over the past year, I've found out even more about this series, including what I believe to be its biggest mystery by far. I know that this video has been, really long, but stick with me because I could really use some help. This is a ride that never ends, and I wanted to make an amendment to this video because I originally had before, but it just wasn't quite in-depth enough, considering all that I've learned recently. But before that, I'd like to start with the discovery I made on iTunes, which is what my original amendment was about. I'll make it short, because it was short to begin with, but essentially, as I was attempting to get the digital rights management off of my episodes, which was a long and expensive process that I never ever want to go through again, iTunes decided that I hadn't had enough trouble sorting them yet. It told me that there were in fact only two I already got you Tim Hortons. It told me that there were, in fact, only 2 seasons. However, what's really weird is that it puts seasons 1 and 3 together. According to iTunes, season 2 is actually the final season. Normally, I'd probably disregard this information, as I was on an outdated version of iTunes anyway. But here's the kicker. When you swap seasons 2 and 3 around, the 2 episodes that call back to previous ones are actually in the proper order. But that still begs the question of why the drop in quality was at the end of season 3. But there's actually a little bit more to this as well. Some websites split episodes up into 4 seasons instead. Granted, these are sites with little to no information, so it could very well just be incompetence. But it is so interesting to me that nobody seems to actually know the order of them. The DVDs just throw random episodes in there from all seasons as well. I don't think anybody really cared about the order. So I guess this means I'll have to reorganize the whole wiki again. That was fun. Or wait, no, you know what? Screw that. Apple TV is the most up-to-date. I'm picking my battles here and leaving well enough alone. But there's something that I can't shake. I'll stop stringing you along now. It's time to get to the most baffling aspect of this show that I've uncovered henceforth. I was going through the Amazon Prime listing one last time to grab some screenshots so that you're not stuck staring at stock videos for 50 minutes. Unfortunately, you kind of ended up doing that anyways. I'm sorry, I don't know how to edit videos. When I began clicking around and found something really strange, there was a listing on that page for an episode that I had never heard of. The title was Arizona, and the description was as follows. 3 adventures unfold. Kaput and Zösky become the sheriffs of a western-themed planet, destroy the railroad system, and travel to the tyrant's paradise planet, Tyrannos. By now, I'm sure you understand that to say I know my way around this IP is kind of an understatement. This past hour should be proof enough that I've invested far too much time and effort into this. I've been on web pages likely only ever touched by their creators. I've rotated these funny little aliens this way and that in my brain for hours on end, and this threw a wrench straight into everything. An unavoidable question looming over everything that I'd done, and there was no way I was letting that slide. So, what information did we have? Season 3, Episode 9, this image, and its descriptor. That was it. But things get even stranger, because if you watched the series walkthrough segment, You may recall that there already is a Season 3 Episode 9. Let me refresh your memory real quick. It's a Mad, Mad, Mad Universe is a really weird episode. I have no clue why, but it's composed of stitched together scenes from old episodes with the voice actors dubbing new lines on top of them. With this in mind, here's my theory. Either Arizona had to be recalled, or was replaced at the last minute, possibly due to censorship as a couple other episodes were held off from being aired for the same reason. But then why is it listed here? Was it actually ever there? The other thing we had was this. The image you'll see associated with this episode is from Season 3, Episode 3B, Gotta Move. A lot of said episode is reused in Mad Mad Universe, so it would be an entirely appropriate thumbnail if it was just that as expected. So, was Arizona ever actually present, or was it just Mad Universe under a different title? The first step was obvious. Google Kaput and Zösky Arizona. I exhausted every single search result, and all I found was that it wasn't just Amazon Prime. Google Play, alongside a couple other obscure websites that nobody cares about, listed it as well. Of course, it was totally possible that whatever AI they used to compile their gargantuan list of TV shows had just been stealing from the wrong source. It only really took one mistake to throw the entire chain out of order. Nonetheless, I couldn't stand the thought of possibly missing something, and so I visited a community that specialized in this sort of thing. Using the Lost Media Wiki's guide on web sleuthing, I exhausted every result on about 15 different search engines, including Google Drive, PDF Search, Nicktoon, and the Wayback Machine, and couldn't find anything. No screenshots, no script, not even a broadcasting slot. Here's what I did find, though. Arizona was uploaded along with the other episodes to Starz Media around 2014. The file is gone alongside everything else purged when Little Amigo took that channel over, and they do not have it uploaded. So what makes it so frustrating is I have a link to it. It was there. The answer was there. But it's gone now. And unfortunately, this is about as far as I can go with this lead. This is driving me crazy. It's so close and yet so far. It was on YouTube, it was on Amazon Prime and Google Play, and yet I missed it by like 6 years. But on the bright side, this should be totally retrievable. We just need to find somebody who had purchased the episode on Prime or Google Play. And then there's the other possibility, and that is of finding a recording of the aired version, assuming such a thing even exists. I'm not sure how to go about something like that though, since this was in the period of time kind of right between DVD and VCR, but surely someone out there who knows this process better than me can weigh in. The third possibility is reaching out to either Lewis or somebody else who worked on the show, but I'd rather not bother them more than I already have, and I'm shy, so if you have any information or are just interested in helping out, then please do either contact me on Discord or join the Wiki's server. Both will be in the pinned comment as well as the description. And with all that being said, I think it's finally time to conclude and put this project to rest. I've worked incredibly hard on this labor of love, and it feels like each day that it goes without sharing is a day wasted. Sincerely, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed and have grown to appreciate at least a little bit this obscurity. The biggest thanks of all, of course, go to my friends, family, and my teacher for their constant, unwavering support. You guys are the best, and I wouldn't have made it through without you. I'd also like to invite anybody who's a fan of Kaput and Zösky, knows anything I might have missed, or is simply interested in seeing what we're up to join the wikis. The link is in the pinned comment and the description. Let's concentrate some of our hyperfixation there. If you're interested in diving into the series and don't know where to start, here's my episode tier list again. Watch S through B, and you can probably skip the rest unless you're really into it. Oh, and if you want to support me, please consider liking, sharing, and commenting on this video. It would mean the world to me. To be perfectly transparent, I'm not much of a YouTuber, so you're likely not going to get a video like this again, but I'm active every day on Tumblr, where I post all of my artwork, and I'm always open to DMs on Discord. Have an awesome day, everyone, and stay batty.
That fucking catchphrase sucks.
Stay batty.
Oh, I have a shred of thin in my neck. What do you need me for?
Chuck that sucker back, Zösky! Woo!